of March, and I am calling the St. Mark Street Park Working Group meeting to order. First order, we have present Bill Signs, I believe.
You do.
Okay. And also Grant Farrington and also James Nichols Worley, whose name is spelled incorrectly on your screen thing. You know that, right? It says Nicholas.
I see that. Let me change that real quick.
I know. I'm so sorry. I had you wrong on the minutes, which I corrected. And Andrew Dennington, and I think we're all here. How do we know if there are people in the chat?
I can see who's in the. Do you have a bar where you can see the attendees?
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. So we have panelists, but nobody in the chat yet. Okay. Good.
Well,
actually, we have 5 attendees currently.
Yeah.
Who are we missing?
Hmm?
Oh, Katie's here. Katie's here. Yep. Okay. Not technically an attendee.
Yeah. But
All
I think,
right.
Katie, I think because you promoted me to co-host that and you started the recording, we can just, then you don't need to stay around for the whole thing, right? We can just, is that right?
Oh, you're sure you don't want to stay for the whole thing?
Yep, if you need me, you have my number.
Okay, great.
Yep, you can drive.
Okay.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay. First order of business is to review and amend and approve the minutes of the February 16th meeting. I did fix the spelling of your name, James. Sorry. I have you now as Nichols. I repaired that. Any others?
I have a few comments if we can work through the document.
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, so I have a numbered lines on mine. I don't know if you guys do or not, but in the second paragraph, it's line 9 when
Right.
Kevin Miller is mentioned. He is the vice chair, not the
Okay. And okay, I actually sent an email to him asking him what his official title now was, but we'll make him the vice chair for purposes of the minutes. Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else?
Yes, just a minor thing. Line 76, which is under discussions of charge, recommendations is spelled incorrectly.
Oh, thanks.
And actually right below that as well on line 78, when it says Daniel Blanchard expresses that the MHC recommends, quote, a program, I think it should be of systemic soil stripping instead of if.
Oh. Okay.
And actually, and on line 94, which is on letter D, again, I think it should be Kevin Miller, vice chair.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so that shows up twice. All right.
Great. And then, yeah, other than James's last name spelled wrong a couple of times, I think that's it.
Sorry, that was me. It was right in the first place, and then you had your own name spelled correctly for some reason, and then I undid it to match your screen thing, and then I said, no, that's not right. So, okay, so we'll fix that. Any other emendations for the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the opening, Grant's first name is misspelled.
Yes, we fixed that. He's not great anymore.
Okay.
He's
I totally missed that, but it might not be wrong, but we'll.
Yes.
Election of officers. It does not show who seconded the motions for vice chair and secretary.
Okay, and I went and looked that up, and I think that of course, in the massive amounts of paper on my desk, I can't find it, but I think in the final version of the minutes the final version of the draft of the minutes, I had the seconds in there. I think one was Grant and I think one was James.
Okay.
Or it could have been Dan. I don't know, but I did go back and look at the tape for that.
Yep.
So I can fix that.
And on discussion of timeline, paragraph B, where it says a bid was put out on the SMSP, a piece of other work on Newton Street. It should say Newton Street, comma, Main Street, comma, and Deerfoot Road.
Okay, Newton Street, comma, Main Street and Deerfoot Road. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
And that's it. I mean, I have a comment of first off, James, I think you did a great job with these.
Yes, absolutely.
Minutes typically don't include direct quotes, but so I don't think they need to be in there, but I will defer to what others think.
I don't care one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer
Summarize
that
it. So it's either going to be a paraphrase so it's either going to be an indirect quote, paraphrase, or a direct quote. I don't care one way or the other. So I will defer to what everybody else would prefer.
I think for now it's good as it is, but for this meeting, certainly I'll truncate the notes.
No, I thought they were great. It's just I haven't seen any. I mean, rarely are there direct quotes, because oftentimes I just don't know. But I think in context here they're okay, but going forward I don't think they're really necessary.
Okay, make your job easier then, James.
So
Good. Any other emendations?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the February 16 minute meeting as amended.
Okay, do I have a second?
Actually, sorry, I just have one more thing.
Okay,
Okay, sorry.
No, yeah. So line 73, which is under administrative, before discussions of charge continued.
Mhm.
I think it would be better to just say the working group concurs rather than W group, just to make it clear.
Okay. Oh, you know what that was? That was my fault. It was made into the acronym, which was so long that I lopped the acronym out, and I was gonna put, okay, so the working group. Okay, that's fine.
Great.
Again, typo city. All right, good. Any other, oh, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Andrew moves, Grant seconds, and we'll do a roll call vote, which will be not alphabetical, but Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Miss Landry, aye. Mr. Farrington.
Aye.
Mr. Nichols-Worley.
Aye.
Mr. Sines.
Abstain.
Okay. All right, so we have 4 accept, 1 abstention, 0 against. All right. Now, number 2 on our agenda, introduce our member, William Sines. Do you want to say a little bit about yourself and your interest in the park area?
Well, okay. We'll give you a little bit of history in terms of my service to the city, I guess. I was for many years president of SOLF, which is a trails and conservation organization. It also owns a substantial amount of land in the town of Southborough, which is used for conservation purposes.
Can I spell you out? The Southborough Open Land Foundation, for those of us who...
Oh, sorry. Yes.
That's all right.
We use an abbreviation. If you haven't seen it, you probably will run into it, depending on what committee you're on. I was also president of, or chairman of the ADA committee. And I am now a member of the new SPAC committee, Southborough Public Access Committee.
Could you just do me a favor? ADA, is that Americans for Disability Act?
Americans with Disability Act, yes.
Okay, Americans Disability Act. And then the name that it's been changed to, what is the whole name of that one?
The Southborough Public Access Committee.
Okay, SPAC. Okay, thank you.
And it's the reason that there is a change. One was a temporary committee, and the SPAC is now a standing committee.
Okay.
A permanent committee. And so I think I've served on those committees. I'm also serving on the master planning committee as a member.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to figure out what the town should be doing over a 10-year period.
All right.
Aside from that, been in towns for more years than I'd like to think. I think we moved into town in 1980, 79, 80. We live over here on 12 Hickory Road.
Okay.
So I guess that kind of summarizes who I am and where I've been. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy. Oh, why am I interested in the park?
Yes.
Here is my view of the park. One of the things we have as a community, Southborough community, in my opinion, is a rather disjointed community. We have villages all over the place, and we have special interests for villages all over the place. If you ask people living in the villages where they live, they may tell you the village and not necessarily Southborough. Maybe I'm exaggerating here a bit. But in any case, it occurs to us that we have to have a mechanism to knit the community together, whether that means sidewalks, bike trails, hiking trails, etc. We need to knit the community together. In addition to that, it would be very nice to have an area within the community, within Southborough, where as a public group, we could occasionally meet. Not the whole city, of course, but people who, for one reason or another, would like to have a somewhat less than the public total citizenry of the city meet to either listen to music, plays, exchange views, debate, whatever it turns out to be. The park that we were discussing here, I believe, is ideally located for that purpose. It's in the center of the titular center of Southborough. It is in an open area between St. Mark's playing fields on either side. And it's centrally located to what is the public, the emergency facilities downtown, our new fire department and police department, not too far from the senior center. The Woodward School may or may not come into play as a facility at some point in time also. And of course, it's near downtown as well as near the townhouse. So it's an ideally located place where, in fact, one could have a town gathering. We're missing a few things there, and maybe we can discuss that when it comes to our view of what the proposed park should be, and how it should be physically connected to the rest of the community. But I guess that's the reason why I'm interested in what's going on here, and I'd very much like to hear what other people think about at least the general view of what the park should be and how we can go about achieving that.
All right, and I'm sure we'll be calling on your expertise with accessibility I would think that would happen as our discussion proceeds. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. I'm a bit of a stickler on that, so if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, that's good. Thanks. Our number 3 agenda item is a response from St. Mark's School Administration concerning our inquiry, which we mentioned during our last meeting, to St. Mark's about their response to the letter from the Historical Commission and the Massachusetts State Archaeological Association concerning the possibility of native burials in that area. Do we have any feedback written at this point? Or okay, so shall we table this until we have more information? What are your thoughts?
I think that makes sense.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll table number 3 pending a written response. Good. Okay.
Well, let me ask you, what did St. Mark's say?
To date, on paper, nothing.
They said nothing. I see. So they have a verbal but not a written response. Did I get that correct?
I'm not sure even about the verbal response.
No response.
Yeah, well, as far as I know, for purposes of the committee and public record, there has not been a response.
What was the question? What was the question that was asked, if you don't mind me?
Oh, that was easy. The Historical Commission had sent a letter to St. Mark's, since they are the property owner for this area north of the burial ground, including a letter from the Massachusetts State
Historical Commission.
Yeah, our historical commission, and was it Mass Historical and the Mass State Archaeologist, both?
No, the Massachusetts Historical Society.
Okay,
The Massachusetts Historical Commission.
Yeah, I know. It's like commissions, boards, whatever.
They recommended speaking to the state archaeologist, but we have not heard anything from the state.
Okay, and there was concern that the place where the park has been planned might contain native remains from when there was a Nipmuc village here that I think was here in 1710, 1720. So this is kind of an issue that has garnered a fair amount of attention, because the last thing I think any of us would want to do would be to create a park there when there were possible burials there underneath it.
I took a Ms. Landry, I took a look at the park here this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And if there were burials there, I sincerely doubt there are burials there anymore. The reason I say that, it has been thoroughly excavated. Most burials of that kind are not 6 to 10 foot down. They're certainly less deep than that. The whole area has been significantly disturbed. So if in fact the issue of burials is in question, I would say it is almost moot at this stage of the game.
Other thoughts?
We did discuss in our previous meeting the disturbance to the ground and the effect that it might have had on burials there. We had, excuse me, we had spoken about the potential for doing a ground penetrating radar specifically, and how I believe it was Michael Weishan in a historical commission meeting a few months ago, I can't remember the exact date, that discussed that because the ground has been so disturbed, that would exclude the possibility of going forward with that route. But it was my understanding that it was more of an open question about potentially doing a dig, an archaeological dig of some kind. So that was potentially still on the table and warranted further discussion. That was my understanding anyway.
Andrew, hasn't in the formal burial ground next to the church there, the Civil War, I call it the Civil War burial ground. Hasn't there been an examination to try to unearth the graves that may have been lost?
So, Bill, I can speak to this. So when you're talking about the Civil War cemetery,
well,
the rural cemetery to the south or the old burial ground?
Yeah, no, it's the one that's near the Congregational Church there.
Okay, so
right next to the park.
Yeah. So I have, in light of the concerns that were expressed at our last meeting in February, I have gathered what information I can, and I have not seen any documentation that this site was a Native American burial site. I've also Russell Horn is in one of the attendees here. He was a former member of the Southborough Historical Society that was involved in the ground penetrating radar work in 2006, 2007, if I have the dates correctly.
Yep.
and he's someone that I spoke to about this. So in terms of what I'm aware of, Marguerite, I look back and in the Zoom invite for this meeting, it was included as one of the pre-reads, but I don't know if people had a chance to look at it. But there is a pamphlet from the Southborough Historical Society around like 2000. It's called A Walk Through the Past, and it presents a walking tour of Southborough's historic.
Yeah, it's the old burial ground page.
Yeah, okay.
Page
So if
14.
you want, I don't know if everyone had a chance to look at it. But if you like, I can share screen and just.
That might be good for people who haven't. And it's page number 14.
I'm looking at the Zoom invite and I don't see any documents attached to it. Am I?
Yeah, I was confused about that too, Grant, but I'll just show you this and I'm happy to circulate this, after the meeting.
Okay, sure. Great.
Well, actually, it's 4 paragraphs long. It wouldn't be that difficult for somebody just to read it into the record.
Here it is. Do you see it? So first off, I'll bring you to the front page. So this is the. Okay. And you can date it because it quotes from a speech in 2000. Doesn't really have a date there, but
yeah, and David Falcone was the president of the Historical Commission at that time.
Russell Horn, who was one of the attendees there, Nick Noble, Fences of Stone author,
Yeah.
contributed to this. So it says here, sorry to scan through this document. Okay.
Can I just read this into the record? It'll take me literally 90 seconds, and I think it wouldn't hurt to have it read in.
Sure. You're talking about the second paragraph or the first paragraph, or?
I just assumed the whole section on the old burial ground.
Well, that's a little bit, but okay.
I'll go fast, trust me.
Okay.
All right, I just like it in there because I think the Historical Commission is there, and the quote here, as you said, is from Nick Noble. When the colonists came to Stony Brook, they found that the Nipmuc tribe had been there before them. They had created a burial ground in, quote, quote, the place of sudden death, interring the dead from 2 plagues in this place. That's John Eliot's Christian Nipmucs, had continued to use it, and since they could not build over it, the colonists continued this use. As such, it was practical to build their meeting house next to it. In the winter of 1727 and 8, those not involved in building the meeting house laid a stone wall around the burial ground. They cut down the heavy brush around the northern and eastern edges, which had sheltered the Nipmuc graves. Thus were the dead belonging to the region's first people bounded in with those buried from the English settlement. That's from Fences of Stone, Nick Noble, page 46 and 47. In 1735, Timothy Brigham proposed and put through financing for a powder house for the town militia in the burial ground within the stone walls. This would contain gunpowder, ball, and shot. In 1740, a scarlet fever epidemic swept through the area and many died and were buried here. In 1750, Common Street was laid out from Main Street and new shelters for carriages and horses were built next to the cemetery south wall. The burial ground was becoming crowded by 1840, and so the town voted to empty the powder house and take it down. In 1843, they closed the burial ground and planned a new cemetery. With the closing, men and women with kin already buried there would also be permitted to lie there, otherwise no more were permitted. In September 20th, 1938, the 1938 hurricane flattened 90 stones, but because of the Depression, money could not be spared to repair them, and they have never been replaced. So that's what the Historical Commission in 2000 had to say about the status of native graves in the old burial ground. Mainly that the wall was created after the natives had been buried there. So it's still very, in my mind, very ambiguous what is where.
So the next, let's see, would it be okay? Russell is here. So Russell Warren is one of the people who did the ground penetrating radar survey in 2005,
good.
2006. Let's see it.
You're bringing him over,
Okay.
or if he wants to speak, of course.
Welcome, Russell.
Well, I don't
You're
know if
on mute right now.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Go ahead and speak. We're waiting to hear what you have to say.
What, I have so much Southborough history, but we're talking about the Nipmuc.
Yes. The
Okay.
question is whether the park that is planned here will be on top of Nipmuc graves, and whether we need to do something to discover where those graves are or what. So any advice would be well received, I trust.
Okay, there's never been any proof that that is the spot of the burials.
Mm-hmm.
Different people have different opinions. And if you go back to the original meeting house, it actually stood in front of where the Pilgrim Church is, closer to Main Street. Okay, so any references of burial ground for the Native Americans would be to the east of the meeting house. So that puts it down further to the southern end of the cemetery if it's there. Now, as we know, the southern end was the part that was destroyed by the trees falling during the hurricanes and so forth. And I don't know if you've all seen photos of that hurricane. You can see
No.
the damage done in there. Okay. There are photos in the old Southborough picture book of that and so forth. And the Historical Society has some. And it was devastation. That whole southern area, very few stones remained from them. I think the burial towards from the east of the meeting house puts it at that southern end, or even down towards the monuments where they stand now.
The howitzer, the gun.
Further to the east, where the flags and the monuments are there.
All right.
Somewhere between there and the southern part of that cemetery where there are no stones, and there's a depression there. Something they came up with, I believe in the report, something was buried there. The ground is all disturbed. Now, whether it's trees, stumps were buried there and the old broken stones were buried there, no one knows for sure.
That's the 2006 ground penetrating radar study?
Yes, you cannot read anything with the radar. It's a mess, okay? The radar, remember, detects ground disturbances. That's how you find the shafts. But if in an area like that, there's been plenty of digging there and no one can tell the difference between anything, as far as I know. Like I was the Historical Society. I was the one that put the measurements in and so forth, but the Historical Commission was funded for that. So they have all the records of that.
So as I understood it, to the north of the walls around the cemetery, where the proposed park plan is for, it was impossible to do the ground penetrating radar because there were too many trees.
Correct.
Okay, so, but your sense of it is that any burials would have been further south and not in the north?
On some of the old maps of Southborough, I see that there were a couple schools up there. Now, could those be the first schools of St. Mark's? I don't know. Were they brick buildings? I don't know. It just says schoolhouse. Okay. The flag school where the Historical Society is wasn't moved there till what, the 1800s? So these schools were well before that.
So the Nipmuc village, according to Nick Noble's map, was right where St. Mark's is now. The school, I mean.
Correct, according to that map.
Do you believe that the Nipmuc would have a burial ground that close to their village or no?
No. Let me back up for a second. The Nipmuc villages were in Marlborough and Ashland,
Ashland.
okay? So we're in between them. There is a burial, Native American burial site in Marlborough, near the downtown. And the Ashland one, I've never been to.
The
Okay.
Fisk excavation that they're doing now?
I have no idea.
Hmm.
I have no idea. But my point will be that there were single families that did move away from the villages. This one in over St. Mark's area could have been one family.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been a village of one family. And I see references, it may have been up to 10 people. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were following the tribal burial customs, they would have been buried up in Marlborough or over in Ashland.
With the tribe, in other words, not separately.
Correct, if they were following their religion or whatever.
Okay.
Now, I've talked to the director of Historical Society in Grafton, where there was a big Nipmuc village
Mm-hmm.
as far as burials. And she says, well, they were all the praying Indians of Elliott.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were getting away from the English customs because Elliott and the government was, pressing them into going their ways.
Spies.
Okay. And that's, go back in King Philip's War. That's what that was all about. Nipmuc joined them. Now, whether and then they were all sent off to Deer Island.
Yeah.
So the English at the time weren't getting along with Nipmuc, even though they were peaceful. You can go back and look at where the Nipmuc sold them the land through deeds and so forth. But I have looked at all the deeds of Southborough because myself and another fellow for 5 years were working on all the old roads and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Not one mention in any one of those deeds about Nipmuc burial ground. And we're talking deeds going back to 1700s.
So I'm wondering why it's saying in A Walk Through the Past, which is the historical commission. I think it's the historical society. Sorry, I'll get it straight eventually.
Yeah.
It says, when the colonists came, they created a burial ground in the place of sudden death, which I assume is from a smallpox epidemic, right? And
Seems
then,
so, yeah.
yes, and then Elliott's Christian Nipmucs had continued to use it. I'm not quite sure why it would say that the Nipmucs continued to use it if they hadn't, but as we know, history is tricky.
It is very tricky, especially back then.
Yes.
I'd like to say one more thing about the
Please.
Nipmuc village. Like I say, that could have been one family. The main Nipmuc village was down on the Sudbury River, which back then was called the Fiddle Neck. Framingham owned it.
Yeah.
Okay. I forget the year it was given back to Southborough, but the village was down there where the Corderville woolen mills were.
Yep.
And if you go back, the commission, I believe the commission was involved when they put in the train station down there.
Oh, I think, Russell, we lost some of your audio.
Okay, can you hear me?
There. Thank you.
Okay, I was probably blocking it. I'm on my iPad. When they did the railroad station down there at Corderville, they had an archaeologist come in, and she did find some artifacts or evidence dating back to the Native Americans there when they dug up the old mill inlets, water inlets, and so forth. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you go back to recently, the radar penetrating, she was supposed to do a follow-up on that whole thing and see if there was any Native American burials. Now, I never saw the Historic Commission report on that. Okay, because I wasn't on the Historic Commission. I was with the Historical Society. And I never heard of anything come of that report. So it was the same archaeologist that was supposed to do it.
Do you happen to recall her name?
I think it's in a news article, an old news article.
All right.
Globe or Southward News, it might have even been in.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
You're a gold mine of information, I have to tell you.
I'm one of the last. I'm one of the last.
So this is very useful. It seems to me that that wherever you had water, streams, brooks, rivers, you would tend to get settlement. Am I accurate? I mean,
yes, their main diet was fish.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now, like you say, that village that was supposed to be over on St. Mark's land, there was a little run of water that ran from the pond that's across the street from St. Mark's. And it was put underground, you may know. And that was part of your problem of flooding the library and so forth.
Yes. It's the Stony Brook, the Stony Brook's revenge. It does not want to be underground. I know.
Right. And I don't think it was a big enough run of water for them to fish from. Okay. So that's why I would say the main village was down there in that part of Corderville.
Right. Yeah.
There was a dam down there and everything.
Yep.
So,
and I think that doesn't that flow into the Assabet eventually? No, not the Assabet. I mean the what we now are calling the Charles. Sudbury? I don't know.
Yep,
Anyway, I'm the wrong
Sudbury
person
River,
to
yeah.
ask. Yeah. Okay. All right. It's the Sudbury, right? Okay. So
Stony
Go
Brook
ahead.
ran into what is now the reservoir.
yes. Yeah.
so Marguerite,
Yes.
if it's okay, just one other point of information that I want to mention while
Oh, good.
Mr. Horn is still here. So
Please.
they generated a map of where when they did the ground penetrating radar survey, then they generated a map of where they found the unmarked burials in the burial ground. And I understand they also did work to look outside of the walls in some areas. And Mr. Horn provided me a copy of this map, and it shows where there was an area where they found burials outside the wall, but it's to the south and to the east.
It's
So it's
facing
closer.
toward Pilgrim Church, right?
Yes.
It's outside of the wall toward Pilgrim Church. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not south and east.
To the south and west, right?
That's right. South and west.
South and
The
west.
west, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got my
So
east.
I guess, and Russ, this is like fabulous information, but I guess, is there enough ambiguity here that we need to wonder about it further? And I would ask the other members of the working group what their thoughts are.
I mean, to me, it's still up in the air. I mean, there's never been proof either way that I can see.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I stand. I go by the old town records and so forth, going back to then. I've read about all the roads. I've got deeds from Worcester County of all the land deeds of all the people. We've checked into, and there's never a mention, like they say, from this tree over to wherever this rock and so forth. There's never been a mention.
So many rods on the stone wall, right? Yeah.
There's no mention of burial ground of Native American burial ground. So it's either within the walls there now, like I say, down in that southeast corner.
Mm-hmm.
At the north end, we even went about 10 feet into the woods with the radar and found nothing. Of course, if a tree went over, you're gonna find a disturbance because the roots will disturb the ground there and that. So, and because of the construction of Route 85 and everything, if it was a little more over towards St. Mark's where that water went through, everything's gone. So I can't prove or disprove.
It's certainly a fascinating history right in the middle of town.
Yes.
No matter how it breaks down, it's to me anyway, very very intriguing.
And as was mentioned before, doing a radar image up there in that area, the St. Mark's Triangle up there, you would find nothing. And I'm not sure that an archaeologist would either. When roads are constructed, it's not just where the road is, the construction goes into the sides and everything. So
where was
that's
the pond?
I might point out that in any low area, and we're talking about an area where this park is, any which accumulates water or runoff, it's going to completely destroy over the course of hundreds of years, even the evidence of a shaft that's been built there. It'll all be compacted in by that water. Be very, very difficult to find a grave if in fact there was one.
I thought it was simply changes in the soil composition due to the calcium in the bones affecting the chemistry of the soil.
Well, radar won't. No, I don't think radar will discover that. Certainly there are tests that could be done. Radar is going to discover whether in fact there has been disturbed ground. That is, the compaction of the ground is different than the ground surrounding it. But let me ask an additional question. Can anyone opine on the burial philosophy of the Indians, the Nipmucs at that time? My understanding was that, in fact, what they did was they wanted, since they did not have permanent stone burial sites that was constructed, as far as I know, that in fact they were burying individuals so they could go back basically to the earth in which they were derived to begin with. If that's
I wouldn't even pretend to know the answer to that.
Well, if that's the case, though, then in fact, if in fact one can't discern a burial there, then in fact the ground on which we're talking about putting a park, it has served its purpose from the Indians' point of view. It has completely consumed the body and is now part of the earth in which they walk and which we now walk.
I'm not sure if that's justification to go ahead with the project because there's no, bones left necessarily. I think my understanding is that it would be considered at the very least historical and, even perhaps sacred ground. So,
well, historical is certainly one thing.
Because the body has been, subsumed, I don't think necessarily is cause for moving ahead. Personally,
so you would do I understand you're not in favor of doing a park?
No, that's not my position.
Okay.
I think we need to be careful, and I think this is a very sensitive area, being right next to the old burial ground, and I think obviously we've been talking about how there's a lot of ambiguity about where exactly or if there's a Native American burial ground. I think we should be, proceed cautiously.
And how would you define cautiously?
Well, I know that there had been talk about the potential for commissioning some sort of archaeological dig, or at least investigating how much it would cost, or who would pay for it, and kind of more technical questions regarding that. So I would be at least open to pursuing that further and seeing what the rest of the committee thinks, or the working group rather.
Or the community of Southborough, for that matter.
So I see,
Hi.
Marguerite, I don't know if you want to go around to other members of the group here first, but Mr. Weishan has his hand up. So I don't know if you want to at an appropriate time bring him in.
Would it be possible? I just
Okay, why
have
don't we?
something quick to say on that.
Sorry.
Okay, go for it.
Sorry to keep you waiting, Michael. Just want to make 2 points. Is that one is that on this topic, the Nipmuc Nation is still in Massachusetts. They're still an active organization, so I think it would one be worth it to ask them, and additionally to quote something from the literature I've read on this topic. This is from Kathleen J. Bragdon, Native People of Southern New England, 1500 to 1650. She discusses mortuary ritual burial practices, basically. She writes, another approach to understanding the relationship between mortuary ritual and culture change has been to interpret 17th century burial remains as reflecting resistance to European presence and domination. Basing his argument on documentary sources, Axtell suggests that burial ritual became increasingly important as an expression of Northeastern Native identity vis-a-vis the European invaders. As the most private of rituals, burials came to represent all that was important about Native culture, and the rights to Native-style burial were among those most energetically defended by Native people in Southern New England.
That's a very hard-hitting piece of data, actually, isn't it?
That is, of course, a very regional, top-down level view. That would cover all of the peoples of Southern New England, from Western Massachusetts to Rhode Island and the Cape and the islands.
Well, it's certainly a case for treading carefully, isn't it? Yeah. Michael, do you have, should we ask Michael to
Yeah,
speak?
I can bring him over, and then Russell has his hand up as well too.
Okay.
So.
Good evening, committee.
Good evening.
Evening. Listen, you guys are all doing a great job. James, I could not have said this more perfectly. My only comment here is talk to the Nipmuc Nation before this goes any further and ask them what they want to do. They are the missing voice here. Whether there are burials under that plot or south of the, meeting house, or however this goes, we know this is an historical fact. We know this is sacred ground, not only to the Nipmuc, but to us as well, because we also know there are colonial burials outside of these walls. So I would urge you, before you do anything else, to get in contact with Chief Holly and invite her into this conversation, because the one thing that has been missing during all of this, to my opinion, has been the Native American voice. We are all trying to presume what they did, what they thought, how they buried, yet no one has asked them. So let's get them on board, please. And that's all I have to say. James, great work. Wonderful citation.
Okay, question, Michael, before we lose you. I think there were 2 letters that CC'd Chief Holly, but I am not aware of any responses. Do you have any ideas, or does anyone have any ideas about a more effective way to reach out?
Yes, I can send you their contact through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and I think they can get through.
Okay.
The website's a little intricate to use. I've not had a huge success with it myself, but I can send that contact information, and I'm sure they would be willing to participate in this process. Well,
Okay, thank you. If you do that to me as chair or to the whole entire committee, I could take it upon myself, or maybe one of us would be okay with taking it upon themselves to do that outreach. And thank you for that reminder.
All right, guys. Good night and thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Russ, are you coming back on? Russell, did we lose you? Ah,
Mute. Am I here now?
yes.
Okay, I'm gonna make this short. I agree that you probably should contact the Nipmuc, and I will tell you that I talked to the director of the Historic Society in Grafton. She informed me there's a 5-acre reservation still in Grafton.
I think
So
it's
you-
down to 3.
Okay, all right. But anyway, you may want to reach out there.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Yeah.
The Native American doesn't like to give out too much information. I'll tell you that right now. People may have found that. I'll tell you, I respect the Native American. I have smoked a peace pipe with the chief of the Western Mass Intertribal Association. Okay. I know some of the Western Mass Native Americans. I'm going to leave you with this. Like Bill said, let me put this right now. I respect that you shouldn't go in there and tread on if it is a grave site, but it's long gone, as is the colonial burials in the burial ground. Now, if you're going to have a history path through that burial ground, you're trampling on my ancestors. And that's the way I'm going to look at it. And I'll leave you with that, okay?
Russell, while we have you, I think that there was done work to look for if there were unmarked burials on the boundaries of the old burial ground, and there weren't any found, right?
That's correct.
Is that around the entire perimeter?
Yeah, that map that Andrew has will show you what we found around the perimeter within 10 feet.
And you have a digital copy of that map, right?
Not the finish like you have.
Okay. All right. We'll
I
find
have
a
the
way.
I have the work in progress ones.
So this is where we might be able to get back to in-person meetings soon.
Okay.
This would be a great example where I could just physically bring this thing with me and everyone could look at it. It's not really shareable.
Maybe if you could take just a phone photograph of it and circulate
It's so
it.
big, it would be even hard to do that. I'll find a way. I'll find a way.
All right. There's got to be a way. We can get men on the moon. We can do this map. I swear to God. So I just wanted to bring up one other possibility.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Russ. And I'm sorry
Thank
to
you.
lose you. You can keep listening if you don't have anything better to do. I don't know why you would want to do anything else except listen to our meeting, but there it is. Anyway, joke. There's also the possibility that because there were native peoples living here before the colonists, that it would be reasonable to commemorate the fact that native peoples did live here, just independent of whether or not we find burials. They were here. To me, anyway, I think that that's an important thing to remember.
So, Marguerite, do you mind if I then kind of use that as a point to talk about?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Are we getting to item 5? Agenda item 5?
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
So, and if it's okay, I'm going to try to adjust 5, 6, and 7. They're so closely related in one.
Okay.
So last week, Marguerite and I sat down with Karen Galligan at the townhouse for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, reviewed plans, reviewed kind of where things are, and some of the concerns that were addressed at our last meeting. And we talked about them and different ideas. And so out of this discussion came a very conceptual idea that I wanted to share. And the idea is to just share it to see if it sparks any similar ideas. So, and this comes back to the point where the original charge of the working group is to make a recommendation to the select board before April 15th regarding what should fill the unfilled circular space, having in mind that the plans originally had a playground there. Then the playground was removed for reasons not having to, really unrelated reasons. So what should go there? And our discussion has naturally taken us in a bunch of different ways. So James, I thought one point that you made at our last meeting, which was a very good one, is about how, the original grant application for the shared streets really focused on a history walk. And I will share screen, but let me get the plans out first.
If it would be possible, if I don't know if you can just put that document in the chat.
I will do both.
Okay.
I'm going to show it on screen, and actually, I don't see a chat, so I'll share screen. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think everyone should have copies of these. I can give you the link for these if you don't have them already. If you look at the stamp, which is, you might have to move the boxes of where you have like the, okay, posted on June 24, 2012. All right, so the history walk. So you see here, there's some references, historic sign, proposed history walk area, but then the sheets don't really have anything that fleshes out the history walk. So the history walk, my understanding, was really removed from these plans out of a cost consideration. But I think that they should, the whole history walk concept should be brought back into this, because I think it's one of the things that got various boards and committees back behind this proposal earlier this year. And one of the things we talked about, what would be the funding source for kind of finishing aspects of the history walk, and it might be a CPC money. And I preliminarily put this on the radar screen of Andrew Mills, who's on the CPC committee. So there aren't really hard deadlines for completing this, although if there were substantial changes to the plans, then they would need to go back out to bid. And in this environment, that means costs go up. But a couple things I just wanted to emphasize here. I don't know if you can see my cursor moving. Okay. So this, if you walk the site, this is where there's just a concrete encased storm drain. And then here's other drainage features that have already been put in. So those are really kind of permanent features there, right? That were designed to go with the design. So I was walking this site today again, and you look at it, I think it just has tremendous potential as enhancement of the town center. And it's pretty big. You look at this just on a plan, you don't really get a sense of it. But for example, if you look at the scale here and you match that up there, like the diameter of this circular space is about 50 feet. So I think things where kind of stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, are the library, obviously, because the library is right down the street here. And this is part of the whole idea of this. It's enhancement of the library space. So it's a place where, for example, I thought a great point that was made in one of the last historical commission meetings, or maybe I guess Marguerite, you mentioned it to me, is how the children's librarian does talks and has to go, over like here, which is where the library septic tank is, right? So I think that just highlights where there really could be a need for a gathering space where there could be talks, presentations here. And I thought Mr. Weishan had a very good idea that he presented at one of the last historical commission meetings about having a kind of amphitheater space. I know he had in mind having it way up there, which would be next to the flagged school, although that is kind of an issue about, getting there. So, but I like the idea of kind of physically connecting it to the library with these paths. So the basic idea that what we just kind of talked about with Karen was the potential of using this space as some type of a pergola or a rotunda, something where you could have talks, etc. And also in a way that would provide some shade. And then this space here, this, I don't know what you call that shape. It's like a hat, like a curved hat.
It's a crescent. I'd call it a crescent.
A crescent. That this would be an ideal place for some type of a historical marker, monument. And really, I'm hesitating to use the phrase the memorial because we don't really know whether there were any burials here or instead here or there or nowhere near here. But I also that there was a lot of, I know that Freddie Gillespie is in the audience too, but I think she has done a lot of work with plans for plantings around here that have native species, and I'd like to keep that in the plans. I think it's important. So basically the idea of bringing the history walk back in, using this circular space as a gathering space of some sort, like a pergola, and using this space as some type of a, I have just been walking around looking for kind of examples or ideas of the types of things you could have. I've seen kind of stone sculpture things, but since it's not really our job, there's no way we could design something like this. One of the things we thought of is having a design competition or design, a call for designs, and definitely bringing Native American museums into, there's different people you can consult to do this. So I think it has a lot of potential. Another thing in context, do you think of it like very much going forward? I think one thing that is on the radar screen that the select board has already started to do is put together a charge for the town's tricentennial in 2027. So I am excited about the possibility of, using this space in a way that is an enhancement of the town center, enhances the library, provides a new gathering space. And there's also nothing in the town center right now which recognizes the Nipmunks and Native American presence in Southborough, and this would be a really unique place to have it. So people would gather here, and then there would be a marker, monument, something here that would educate people about Native Americans. And I thought one point that Dan made, it's too bad he's not here, that was, I thought, very important, was that there'd be an educational component to this. So that was an idea that we had where we'd kind of meet a lot of the different things that I think all the different stakeholders are looking for, in a way that would really fit within the existing plans without too much additional re-engineering. So that's kind of the big picture idea that we had. And maybe if you like, I can stop sharing and then ask if people have any questions, comments, concerns.
If you could keep the document, just a good reference for the discussion.
Grant, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I guess a couple points. First, I guess I wasn't exactly clear about what you're referring to, Andrew, with the amphitheater. I know that Michael Weishan in the Historical Commission had talked about the potential over across the street on behind the flag, on that kind of embankment there behind the flag school. So how, I guess I wasn't clear what you were saying in terms of how that would play into, were you saying that it should be on this parcel instead?
Yes,
or?
that concept, except use it in this space.
Okay, so that's what I thought. I think there's some just physical problems with that. I'm not an engineer, but the parcel itself is pretty flat, if I'm not the St. Mark's Triangle is pretty flat. And so it's my understanding that, you would need I believe, well, obviously you can change.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an amphitheater, but it would be circular gathering space.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So there would be benches around it.
Yes, although Karen did say that, like here, if we were to, there's benches here that, I don't know, those might move. See, those are in the specs for the current contract, but those something that might have to come out. But I do think having a place where people can sit is important too.
Sitting is good. This whole entire design was done by the same company that designed the Main Street project. I'm just wondering if this is not too much hardscape for me. And the other part of it is that here I'm pointing to it on my own screen. The history walk is going over Freddie's plantings in the back of the library through this. It's going right over her native pollinators garden. So I guess we have to readjust that. I am just not a fan of having something that looks like a bandstand in the middle of this. I have to speak out on this. I am very much in favor of having the native plants here as per the plannings, because I think it's what the Nipmuc would have seen. And I am very much in favor of having some kind of honoring of the fact that whether it was one family or several families, they did live here. And I think that should be, to me anyways, an important piece of this, whether or not there's a dig. There were people here, and I think they need to be honored. I would ask for sensitivity in the way that this is approached. That's all.
And to that point, I know this group, because one of the things that probably attracted people to the working group was in the charge. We specifically mentioned thinking about recognition of Native American history. But I mean, I've also spoken to residents who would prefer to see this space used for a much more active form of recreation. Some people like the playground idea. I mean, I think given everything that we have heard now, so I think that I agree with you. I'm leaning towards a more, not in anything which is really an intense use, but just more of a, use it as a gathering space, and also in a way where, town events can be held here. I mean, I know that you're chair of the library board of trustees, so I defer to you on this, but a way which can kind of enhance programming at the library. The idea of the pergola, again, this is just an idea I'm throwing out there, was that it can provide some shade in the summertime, because that could be important in the summer. I can't tell whether people have their hands up, so I'm going to briefly stop sharing. No one has their hands up in the audience.
Okay, good. Bill, you're very quiet. What are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts?
Well, Freddie has.
Yes.
I certainly come at this obviously quite late, at least one meeting late. I think there is an interesting, this is a unique place in town. And so the fact that we have parking adjacent to an open space that can be developed both from a historical and from an active community point of view is quite unique here. I can think of very few places that is as this central and has all of these particular issues associated with it.
And you do realize that the library, it would have to be dragged kicking and screaming to give up any of their parking spaces because they're using them all now, right?
Well, I agree with that, and from an ADA point of view, the historical walk that is around the library is inaccessible to people in wheelchairs.
Correct.
So
Yep.
we have those classes of issues. If in fact we can have an area where in fact people of all basic capabilities, physical capabilities, can either walk, ride, or whatever, wheel themselves to a relatively flat location, still remains this is a unique area. Now, what we also have adjacent, semi-adjacent to this piece of property that St. Mark's obviously wants to use for parking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if an agreement can be made as to whether the city can, on occasion, and with appropriate notification, utilize that for parking. But if in fact one could, there could be dozens and dozens of cars that could be parked over there without abutting or having a problem necessarily associated with library parking. Even if in fact a path was made from the library parking lot over to this piece of property, then the library, if that were to occur, the library would have to put special striped parking aside for handicap and van parking. So they would lose at least two, and probably two, I would guess. I'd have to count the total number of parking spots over there. But they would be obligated in that particular context to provide handicap access to this particular facility if the town
They
chose
probably
to.
should have. They have only two just regular non-van handicap spots right now. But apropos of that, when Andrew and I met with Karen Galligan and we looked at the possibility of the history walk, one was instead of shooting it up over the hill, aka as the septic tank hill, to put it flat, so that it came down out of that spiral and went just to the western side of the library parking lot. And I went through this with Ryan also, and also with Freddie. It can be flat. If the history walk were put so that it went to the west of the drive of the parking lot, around to the front entrance, then onto town sidewalk, it could make a decent loop up to the old meeting house, the new Pilgrim Church and the old schoolhouse, and come back down around the other side. And it is flat. It wouldn't even need that much help. So that the history walk, rather than as in the original iteration, it went up against the stone wall around the old burial yard. If it just came down flat, I think it would work out fine. So I'm holding out hope for the history walk. My question is simply, and I know Recreation had some ideas for putting in there, and then the thought was that the children's playground is literally a stone's throw away from this. Why would you build a second one right here? Mm-hmm. And the thought was, if you're going to spend that energy on a children's playground, do work with the one that is now located, P.S., on top of the old town pound.
That's right.
Right. So why not just enhance that one and use that, make that bigger, better, whatever, and then concentrate on something of a different stripe for this piece of property here.
100% agreed. I like that kind of thinking, to be very honest, because what it allows us to do is it allows us to take as a view not only this particular segment, burial ground or not, this particular piece of property, and try to integrate it in with all of the other town-owned properties that we town-own or that we might have access to in that particular area. And that makes a great deal of sense to me because it adds value beyond whatever we're going to do to develop this one piece of property.
Yes, it's sort of the emerald necklace concept.
Correct.
Where you have linking of parks and green areas that go on and on and on through, well, we're not an urban area, but through a built-up area, so that you could conceivably just keep going in a lovely wooded space for a long way in town.
Right. And if you, in fact, sit down as I had to, or as I did this morning with the Trails Committee, the Trails Committee could bring a great deal to integrating these areas, and if in fact they were brought into the discussion at some point down the road, that along with the complete streets monies that would be available for us, one could begin to approach exactly what you're referring to here. That is an integrated collection of civic spaces within Southborough.
And I think that's lovely. As I said, I may be alone in this, but I am not married to that spiral hardscape design that we're looking at right now for that area. And I'm wondering if it'd be possible to, I know that our charge is to do something within that circle, but I'm wondering if the town would be better served if our energies were directed toward possibly revisiting the shape of the hardscaping there, period. I don't know.
Marguerite, first, I can give you a quick thought on that, but also want to mention that
Okay.
Freddie Gillespie had raised her hand, and then Michael raised her hand. So you could, I'll take your guidance on when you
Freddie
want
hasn't spoken, so Freddie,
Okay.
we can hear from Freddie, and then Michael has spoken, so we can hear from Michael. How's that?
Sure. And just to your point about the spiral idea, there you get into costs with re-engineering the plans, because things that would alter, if you alter the amount of pervious space, then you need to do new stormwater calculations, and you probably want to work within where the three existing drainage spots are.
Yeah, I'm thinking, didn't VHB use this park design for a park that was located in a city?
I don't know.
I guess that would be a VHB question.
Okay. So I'll bring it over. Freddie.
Sorry, what was it, James?
I was just wondering if, to follow up on that, is I know the DPW has been doing a lot of good work on some numbers for this project. If I'm the last person in favor of egregious wastes of money, but I wonder how much it would cost to redevelop the drainage. I think if that's something we're interested in, I wonder what that number is.
Also,
yeah, go ahead.
While we're on the subject of costs, Andrew had mentioned the use of CPC funds for the history walk. I think there's a broader issue here, which is that we did receive a grant as a town for a history walk of $290,000 as part of the Shared Streets program. And that I've read the grant application, and it clearly says that it should be used for history walk with other things like sidewalks and other infrastructure improvements to connect the park to other areas of town. And I think that it's $300,000 that was supposed to go towards this use, and so far has not. And as Karen Galligan mentioned in I think it was the January 5th or 6th advisory committee meeting, that money has been completely spent, because she essentially combined the $300,000 that she got with that into the larger $2.5 million Complete Streets project. And so, I do have some concerns, serious concerns about potentially spending, hundreds of thousands of more dollars on a history walk that we supposedly already spent money for.
Andrew, that may be a Board of Selectmen conversation you should have.
I haven't looked into that. I don't have the same concern, Grant, but we could go into it. But I know that Freddie had been. Want me to bring her over?
Sure, let's hear from Freddie.
Hey, Freddie.
Hi there. I think I'm unmuted now.
Nope, you're fine.
No, you're fine.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Freddie Gillespie. I I thought a couple of things. I know everyone here except for James, and if anyone's listening, like it's not been made clear why my name's being mentioned, what role I play here. So in all aspects, it's not me, Freddie Gillespie. I'm the chair of the South Open Space Preservation Commission. And when this project was first proposed, we were asked to submit a letter because, and I don't know how the application went, but we did submit a letter that went in with the application because a pollinator garden was part of the concept. And whether that made it into a formal identification, our position is the town got funding in part because funding pollination projects in the crises we're in right now is very popular for funders. And we feel that is still a big component of this project. And the work we've done and everything so far, we did not design where the gardens went or the layout of the plan. Our role is solely that we are reviewing and recommending which plants go into the gardens. And we hope there's still a garden when all is said and done, and also other plantings besides formal gardens. This also independently connects to a project that we had started before this even became on the radar, which was a pollination preservation habitat on the library grounds directly adjacent to this. And that made this connection even a bigger component of a whole, because we could fill in the missing pieces that you can't put everything in a small area. So our goal also has always been to create, in the past, this area of the library grounds was underutilized and neglected. I shouldn't say underutilized, like just not utilized, except for at night, you might see people walking their dogs through there. To make it more of a vital area for the library, to have a nature-based learning area. We are working with a professor who is going to bring citizen science to, the library and to the citizens of Southborough. And we could do it right in this area. So, there's a lot of win-win-win here, creating an attractive area for people to gather, to learn. It wasn't just science and gardening and flowers, but really also there is some of the sciences, we're hoping to provide resources for education on climate change. Native plants have a big role to play in reducing a lot of the negative impacts of our current landscaping. These are display areas where people can see this is a new type of gardening, not something people are familiar with, and they need to learn how it can look in a more landscaped area so they can want to do it at home. But all of that is just my saying that, that's the view the Open Space Commission brings. We believe there was just like the history walk, that the pollination native planting is a component of this park that shouldn't be somehow, when all is said and done and all these other things come into play, that it gets dropped by the wayside.
No,
So far,
Freddie, I don't think there's any question of doing that. I think if everybody can agree on one thing about this park, is that the pollinators and the other plants should be in that area.
And that's what I'm hearing. I'm just making, we're talking about
Yeah.
now bigger amphitheater. And I also wanted to be very clear, though, we did not design the layout. We are not, we are not committed to the layout. We just want to make sure that this component of the native plants, pollinator friendly, remains in some form. And
yes, I think we're all in agreement. We're absolutely in agreement on that.
Okay. And I just also want to take off my Open Space Commission hat and make a couple of comments as a citizen. That would be all right. I hear talk about this big gathering place, and I understand, there's the desire for that, and it sounds wonderful, right? But you always have to I always take the bird's eye view. And where's the parking? So what we're surrounded with, just think about this before if you're going to have big events, lots of people there. You have library parking. The library needs their parking lot for library. You have the St. Mark's parking lot. It's St. Mark's parking lot. then you can go across the way. Well, you know, the townhouse has a townhouse parking lot, but there's also Pilgrim Church has a Pilgrim Church parking lot. And I believe there's an agreement between a shared parking lot for the church and the library. And just be aware, you could start having these, you know, large events that are impacting other, not one or two, but now I just think I named 4 different entities that you have to be aware of. And I will say that as a member of Pilgrim Church, I'm not speaking for the church, but I know when they did the Main Street rebuild, we lost a lot of parking. And people said, oh, you're going in parking because they're it doesn't work that way. If people are parking, you've got 20 cars on a street and now it's been reduced to 8 spaces. You've lost parking. And we've lost parking along the sides of roads that, you know, somebody says, well, that wasn't legal parking. Well, it didn't say no parking. We don't have parking space in town. So you have a church that's already lost parking spaces that I'm aware of, you know, adding additional pressure. And it's not just on Sundays, you know, the scouts meet there. There's lots of other activities that happen. So that's just at the church. Then you've got the townhouse, which has, you know, under COVID, we forget how full that parking lot could get.
Well, I think, Freddie, I think philosophically, I mean, speaking as an introvert, I think of a park there being as some place quiet where you can take a book and sit on a bench by yourself for 3 hours, and that's my idea of a good time. So I don't see it as a large gathering spot, but maybe other people have different ideas. But I do want to assure you that the native plants, in my mind anyway, is a very major part of what's going to go on this place. Partly
Yeah,
because
thank
that's
you.
what the Nipmucks saw.
Yeah, and
when
I
they
wasn't
got
trying
up
to
in
say, that you weren't. I was just,
Yes.
you know, I'm here in the background and keep my name's being mentioned, and at least
Yep.
James anyhow has never met me before. And the other thing I would say when you're talking about having these gathering spaces, which I'm not for or against, right? There's no concepts. You're talking about ideas. You know, people can bring folding chairs and blankets.
Well, the other, what I think we're
They
sort
don't
of
have to
getting
have
ahead
all
of
benches.
ourselves here, Freddie, a little bit, because we have the Neary Field, we have large areas where you can park plenty of cars around if we're going to have something large like a concert here, I think. But you bring up a very good point with the parking, which is that, is this going to provide more parking or less parking? I think it's going to break about even. So if there are events there, then it will be a problem. But I think we still need to get back to the basic place of what do we want on this piece of ground and how do we get to that?
So if I may just say, I was only responding to comments that had been discussed at this meeting tonight while I was here. So, you know, I would just, if you're planning, be thinking about, you may look around and think there's lots of parking, but that parking belongs to other entities.
Yeah, we'll be the first to tell you that the library parking lot fills up, and we've got issues there too. So the parking part is
also back to well, there's 2 other issues. One is I'll just be quickly, sorry to
no, that's it. No,
your
take time.
To the history walk going through the library.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that before I even thought any of this was really, it was just a concept plan. I was like, how does that even work? And it wasn't even a real plan from what I understood at the time. It was just like a line drawn where maybe it could go. So I think Marguerite's suggestion, and I did look at that with her, having a sidewalk on the side of the parking lot, I think it would also help the situation at the library, because right now you have families with little kids getting out of their cars and walking through a busy parking lot with cars flying through it. So, I mean, it would be a win-win in that way. And the other thing I was going to mention was I was going to wait to another time, but I'll just mention it because we're talking about a lot of things. In the area where the driveway comes into the library, the parking lot, there is, I thought it was on the library ground, so I was looking at it for a rain garden as part of a library project. but it's actually on the St. Mark's grounds, part of this easement. You don't have anything planned there now that I know of. I mentioned it to Karen, and she had mentioned that, well, she thought she would fill it in. Supposedly some of the drainage on the rest of the St. Mark's Road relocation is going to help with the water there. But this little depression, it fills up like a pond, and then it flows like a stream days after it stops raining. And I've got video of it doing that. And there are bioretention, rain garden, more of an infrastructure type thing that could work to not only maybe keep the water there, but could also create a beautiful, and how you do that is nature-based solutions with native plants that would help, infiltrate the water, would help, suck up the water maybe, but this really needs to be more than, just planting plants around it. It needs more of an engineering design thing. And that is certainly something I was going to talk with the selectmen, because it doesn't seem like it's necessarily part of this project.
Well, it is on the piece of land that is on the licensed area to be traded, or eased, or however you're going to do it. However, since the 3 drains have already been installed, that area is still filling up with water. So yes, Freddie, something needs to go there because the 3 drains are not dealing with it.
And this is something so at first I thought I'd be talking to the library, but it's something I have some pictures
It's
and
not ours.
examples.
It's not library land.
Right, as we discovered. But
Yeah.
I think it's further down the road because it would not be any way part of the park that's on the plans right now. And it would be something that we could, see what shakes up with this first phase, and then see what we could add there, because you don't have the funding, so it would need to be additional funding. And when I thought it was on the library grounds, I thought it could be added to a project the Open Space Commission, in partnership with the library, is already going to be looking for funding for. So I'll just throw that out there.
Thank you so much. And can I say that at this point in the meeting, I anyway have reservations about the current VHB or plan
You can
for
take me
that
off.
piece of land. And I think the plantings are also still in play. Michael, are you still with us?
I am.
Your thoughts?
I'm thinking you guys are running an endurance race here.
We have not even begun. We have not even hit Heartbreak Hill yet. We are
I've
just
run
gonna
10
keep
miles
going.
in one day before,
Right.
nothing new.
So, I will reiterate again my feeling that you need to talk to the Nipmuc Nation before anything else happens here. I will say secondarily that we are not all in agreement about this pollinator garden and the idea of a park construct. That's a white man's construct, right? It's like a park, we're doing this, we're doing that. Let's get the opinion of the people who count here and ask them what they think.
Okay, can I make it my job within the next 7 days to make what you're suggesting happen? I can just.
You would become my new favorite person, Marguerite.
Oh, okay. Let me see what I can do in the next 7 days with that.
It's just that again, we are contemplating solutions that are very Western on a place that is not. So let's consider what's going on, and let's talk to the folks that have the original stakeholder here. Thirdly, I just want to say very briefly, and I will let you go, I have serious concerns about the funding of this project. Not only, as Grant mentioned, from the $290,000 shared streets grant, but the fact that we are spending Chapter 90 funds on a private piece of property, which seems, at my read at least, to be illegal. So we have yet to get a real accounting of how this goes. And I think the entire status of this project is up for state review. So I would encourage us to take the time while all of this is being investigated to speak to the original landholders here and let's see what we can accomplish.
Okay.
Good work. Well, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. So here's my plan. I would like to take the next 7 days to do the best that I can to contact someone, or through someone, maybe even one of the other people in the working group, to actually open a line of communication, see if Chief Cheryl Hawley or any of the other people we may be able to address are interested in this. And do you think it'd be possible for us to meet a week from today, which is St. Patrick's Day?
I think so. I think it would be necessary to meet before we send any kind of communique, just so we're in order in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm free on the 17th.
I'm available.
Yeah,
Andrew?
Yep.
And Will? Oh, Bill, I mean, sorry.
No, I am available.
Oh, you are?
I'm
Okay,
available,
good.
yeah.
All right. So before we drive ourselves completely insane tonight, can we set our next meeting for 7 o'clock on the 17th, which is Thursday, assuming we can get a Zoom room for that? And I'm not making this the last agenda item of the night. I'm just saying, can we do this before we, okay, I think that'll be good. All right, so,
You're on my calendar.
okay, excellent.
Do we need to move that for
I
vote?
don't think we do for scheduling, do we?
No.
No,
Okay.
okay. All right, Andrew, I haven't heard from you for a while.
I spoke a lot before, so then I didn't have as much to say afterwards.
I'm wondering if I... Oh, sorry.
I'm done.
I'm wondering if we could touch on one point, because we've certainly gone there already, is I think someone mentioned the charge of the group has, at least our focus here in these meetings, have expanded. So I'm wondering if we should, at this point, definitely consider expanding the written charge of this group, because as it looks now, today's the 10th of March. I don't know how realistic a recommendation is within the next 4 weeks. So,
No, I think that we can get we could just report where we are, have a couple more meetings, and then come to the select board before mid-April and just kind of report where we are, some of the ideas that we talked about. If the working group is something where it doesn't necessarily come to a clear consensus on idea A, but instead we can report here's what the discussion was at point A, here's what the discussion was at point B. Then that at least gives the select board some guidance about kind of what to do next. And then, if there was going to be a consideration about, okay, we want you to look into other things, then the select board could consider that too. But I agree that the idea that like a whole completely different plan is going to come out of this in 3 weeks, probably not realistic, but at a conceptual level, hopefully something can.
Andrew, are we up against any construction deadlines that we should be aware of?
Really?
No, I think no, fortunately.
we are up against town meeting, however, which is in May, albeit, but it creeps up on you.
Listen,
I'm well aware.
The town meeting warrant article is on whether the town will accept the land switch between the school and the town.
And a citizen's petition as well, somewhat tangential to the matters that we're discussing as well. But just to clarify, we're not. I don't think we need to finish our work necessarily by town meeting, right? It's not like we're presenting a
No, we
warrant
don't.
before
No.
anyway. Okay.
Well,
But
the
it's
charge was to get something by that date. So I think we should do that.
However, Andrew had a very good idea when we were in the meeting with Karen Galligan. It was that I don't think, rather than the five of us coming up with, oh, let's do this, the idea was to do an open competition, actually to send the call out for sort of like they did for the Vietnam Wall. You do an open competition and you send out the call all over the place, all over the country if you want to. What would you suggest to put in this space? And see what you get.
Yeah. Although, I mean, the idea that I had was you could fit it in a particular place within the plans.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's a place within the plans where I think it would be appropriate.
Right, but the idea of throwing it open to a competition, I think, was a fabulous idea, Andrew.
I'm not as familiar with the practicalities of it, so maybe we get some advice on someone else that's had experience doing something else similar in another town. I'm sure we could find out how to do that.
I mean, it's just one option for proceeding. That was all.
Marguerite, do you believe though that we need to have a general concept as to what we want before we ask an architect or someone else to propose a design?
From this conversation tonight, I have the following concept in my head. One, we must make every effort to contact the Nipmucks or other people who were here first and find out what their priorities are. They may say, we don't care. They may say, we want to do it all. They may say, I don't know what, but I don't have any idea what that response would be, and I think we need to find that out. Then when we have that, then we can move on to the next part.
Just don't tell them where my property is located. They may have an opinion as to what I should be doing too.
Where's your property located? No,
Self-romance.
You're safe. You're safe. Anyway, so that's how I feel about it. I feel like the first step has to be being sure that we ask the people whom we're trying to include in this if they want to be included and if they do what they want. Right?
Fair enough.
I agree.
And we really have to try hard to do that. And I sincerely hope that that it's a successful conversation. But anyway, so that's where I am after, what time is it? 8:46. It's only been an hour and 46 minutes. And it seems like things are clarified, sort of. And I would also really like to hear back from St. Mark's about what their thoughts are on it, since they're such a part of this too.
If I could touch back on, just pivot to something we just touched on, putting out an open bid. If we as a group would be responsible for sort of soliciting a plan for this, do we know what our I know there have been very detailed plans on the budget for this, but what is the do we know exactly what we're working with, or is it a flexible budget?
For money, we can fundraise. Fundraising.
We're CPC, right?
Yes. Yeah.
James, you familiar with? I'm sorry, I keep saying CPC. I mean CPA. You familiar with what I'm referring to as CPA?
Yeah, it's the community preservation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay then. So any funding for our suggestion would be independent from the funding for the rest of the park.
I don't see why
More or
not.
less.
Yeah. I think money can be got. I mean, I think we could fundraise. We could do a lot of different things. We could write grants. We could do a lot of different things. So I don't think that the fiscal constraints should determine what we end up doing here.
Well, I just know.
Yes, I
Other
100%
parts of the
agree. I
process.
mean, we're talking about a concept here as opposed to an implementation. So
Yes, yeah.
And I would also encourage anyone that had any other, like the idea that came out of the meeting that Marguerite and Karen and I had. If anyone else has an idea like that or a variation on it, that would also be productive.
Did you have that idea before we had the meeting, or did it just pop up during the meeting?
I thought the key point was where Marguerite, I'm not Marguerite, that's you.
how about that?
Karen mentioned that crescent space and how, that could be used without having to re-engineer a lot of the plans.
And it wouldn't just plonk something down right in the middle of the circle. It would be.
That's right, because I know that was a concern that you had. So I thought, wow, this is a way that can kind of address the concern that you had and then bring in some of the positives to some of the other ideas that have been floated out there too.
Progress is being made. I'm thinking maybe. What do you think?
Andrew, may I ask a question about the ownership of the property on which the park would occur? I believe we had a discussion which indicates that in essence is being leased in some sense from St. Mark's, and it can be repossessed at some point in time. Is that true? Is that my understanding correct?
Not least, it's there is a reciprocal license agreement executed, and it gives. I can give you a copy of it.
I also had the question with that. Was it true that one party was leasing and the other party was receiving an easement?
Well, it's not leasing; it's a license, so it's a right to enter onto.
I mean, a license, right.
Yeah,
but then
it's
I thought
also,
if that has a 300-day expiration, then
no,
it's
not a
no longer
300-day
what it is.
expiration.
I mean, a 300-day whatever it is in there, that it changes it legally.
It goes on indefinitely.
Mm-hmm.
Although in the recitals, it recites that the parties have agreed to swap easements subject to town meeting approval. And so the license agreement is revocable on 300 days written notice. Although before either party was to, if they wanted to do that, parties would need to attempt to resolve the issues before anyone revoked or restricted the license. So 300 days is a lot of time, where as a practical matter, something would happen to resolve the issue. And I think one of the practical things that drove the licensing agreement was that the area that, bring up the easement area map.
Can you put up the picture with the two colors?
Yeah, okay.
To me, that was very telling.
Yeah. Okay. Where is share screen? There it is.
Thank you for doing that.
Labeled Exhibit A, is that correct?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so the purple, this is the exhibit to the
Karen just redid this one. This one is I think she just did it last week, right? With the colors?
No, this is the exhibit A to the license agreement. Right.
Because the history walk has been changed where it goes.
Yeah, but this is something different. This is showing the areas that are subject to the agreement to swap easements. So
yes, and I think she made them colors so that I could see it better.
Yes. And I think it's part of in some of the public packets, the color wasn't shown, so it wasn't. Okay. So here's the area of here's the St. Mark's area, right, is this. I'll trace it with the cursor. Okay. Right. And the town right of way, which is where St. Mark's Street goes right now, is this.
The blue part, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the town, this arrangement allows this to be built before St. Mark's gets this, which effectively shuts down this road. So there needs to be a way for this road to continue to function before this were to go to St. Mark's. If that makes sense.
So the sweet part is St. Mark's gets a lot of parking, so they don't have to have everybody parking along 85.
St.
And-
Mark's gets this
Mhm.
part to additionally add some parking.
And then the town actually gets more square footage, like a lot more, like almost
31,000 square feet
Mhm.
to 16,000 square feet.
Yeah, so it's almost double for the park.
Yeah, and it's closer to this blue part is contiguous to St. Mark's property. This purple part, or what we call that, pink, is contiguous to town property.
Does that clarify a little bit, Bill, of what, I mean, this town meeting, it's going to come up in town meeting. It's going to be very interesting, but it's exactly the question that you asked. But
No,
this is
I do understand it. It sounds a little unusual when in fact you casually talked about it. Because it basically implies that after we've spent a tremendous amount of money, let's say on a park, that for some reason St. Mark's could notify us and then over the course of a year take that property back.
Well, if the town approved the easements, then it couldn't.
Well, I think that's an outstanding question because, I think we have to consider what happens if the town does not approve the easements. I think a lot of people, in some of the meetings that I've watched kind of just assume that it will happen, but, town meeting has the authority here and they could very well reject it. So, do we have a good idea of what would happen then?
And the license agreement would still be in place.
bring it back to town meeting again, and then bring it back to town meeting again, and then bring it back to town meeting
See,
again.
that's a thing about this issue, and I know this is totally not within the scope of the charge. It's just an issue which came up.
Yeah,
and
well, we're just speculating, like everybody in
Yeah.
Southborough is wondering about this at this point.
Well,
So.
it is actually on the agenda. I think it was point 5, talking about
Is it?
easement.
Yeah. Oh, good for you. Right.
kind of.
Thank
But-
you.
A vote to reject the easements, it just kind of leaves us back in the situation we are now,
Okay.
right?
But so should we be considering what happens, what to do if that happens? Or are we just going to assume that it will pass?
I don't
and
think,
it's going to be great.
We have no
I'm
control.
not sure that's our
Well,
charge.
I don't see a lot of the work like in here beginning before the town meeting vote on the easements.
Okay.
So
So here's
Okay.
the way I see it. Would it be nice for the town to have this pink spot? Yes. Am I madly in love with this particular design? No. Do I think maybe we could come up with or suggest or work out a better design? Yes. And so is this abutting the library, which could use more land? Yes. So I'm going to assume that we can make it work somehow. I'm just really still thinking that the part for me is up in the air is all of that hardscape, all of that pavement there.
you mean here?
Yeah, the spiral of this, that's just a lot of hardscape.
Okay.
And-
And then I think
and-
that's where
Yeah.
Bill's probably going to have something to say because his
Mhm.
focus is on the ADA.
Well, can we do ADA without having all of that hard ground?
Oh, there's no question. There are tons of ways of doing things.
That's what I'm
But
thinking.
the point from an ADA point of view, you simply have to keep in mind what the rules, regulations, and more specifically, the law is concerning access to public facilities.
What if this circle in the middle was bigger?
Or made of compacted stone dust, or any number of things which might be permeable. All those are permitted with respect to ADA requirements.
Well, that's why I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that, because I'm just wondering if this is I know it's not our charge, but I'm just wondering if this is the best design.
Oh, I couldn't even answer the design at this stage of the game. There are people who could, engineers are supposedly, who submit designs, are supposedly familiar with ADA rules and regulations, and they will stamp, meaning they will put their own embossing on the plan itself, indicating that it passes ADA rules and regulations.
But that doesn't say that it's the only one that would for that.
No, it does not. It absolutely does not. And there isn't only one that would. There's no question about that. But you have to be cautious, because take St. Mark's is building a large building over there for a dormitory.
Right.
They had a stamp on it which says it meets ADA requirements. We found out, we submitted to the ADA committee. I'm using ADA as opposed to SPAC, but it was submitted to the ADA committee. And after a brief look at those plans, it was obvious that they, in fact, were missing a requirement for ADA rules and regulations, a serious one. And they had to go to the state. Now, when I say ADA, there are two components. There's the federal component and the state component. We actually work under the state component as the federal component. So I'm using the term here loosely and interchangeably. But they had to go to the state to get a variance for doing something in that building that was not compliant. But at the same time, they asked for a number of different things, number of different variances, and they were only granted 2 out of several. So they, in fact, had to conform to the requirements that the state put forward with respect to ADA rules. The reason I say all of that,
go ahead.
I waste everybody's time saying that, but the point is that, in fact, even engineers who claim they know what they're doing may, in fact, be not knowledgeable of this.
Well, it's true. And that's why I'm wondering, I look at this and I think, what else could be in this spot?
Any number of things. But the rule, I think the decision, from my point of view, we need a strategy for what should go into the spot. And then once we have that, how do we implement it? How do, in fact, we express it to all members of society within the town of Southborough, abled or disabled? And once you then view it in that context and ask those questions, you can then make a decision as to how you want to go about implementing the strategic concept that we put together here. Right. Do we want a display for nipmucks? Do we want bandstands? Do we want God knows what? But any one of those,
right? Someone also said to me, for people who are not sighted, there are wonderful gardens that have very strong, nice scents that you can use. And I thought, well, wouldn't that be a nice thing to have?
There are all sorts of different things that could be done. The sighted component, while I think your description of something that would be nice is great, that's not really under ADA rules. Nobody requires a scented display, for example. It's a nice thing to do, but it's not required. What would be required under those circumstances for a sighted individual is if you express something, if you're saying, here's a display of X, there's got to be a way for a non-sighted individual to say, oh, that's a display of X. And it can be audio, it could be braille, it could be any number of things.
Well, this is another thing we really need to consider, I think.
Yeah, but I'm glad to hear you say that. because I think there are two things. I think the city can go far above what the specific requirements are to include members of our community, number one. But number two is you have to meet the minimum. And here's why. If in fact somebody walked into a facility, a public facility, and said, this doesn't meet ADA requirements, they will report it to the city. And if the city doesn't rectify that within date certain, they can go to the state, and the state can say, you have to rectify it. And by the way, here's a six-figure fine that we're going to level against you because you did not make your public facilities ADA compliant.
Right.
And
Grant,
so really,
I'm sorry, Grant, were you going to say something? Your box has been green.
sorry.
My box, sorry, what was that?
Bill was talking about that. You know how you get the green around the box when the person starts to talk? Are you?
Yeah, I didn't know what you're referring to there.
Sorry.
I just wanted to say that I agreed with Bill that I think I think it makes sense to think about the proposed use that we want to have for this space and have the design flow from that. I think that makes sense. We've mentioned a large gathering space. I'm not saying that's what should go there, but if you wanted to have a stage on one end and hundreds of people filling the space, which I don't think we should, but if you wanted to have that, then you would probably want a wide open area. Maybe you could make it ADA compliant by having a path entering and a path leaving, but less hardscape and more green space. Whereas if you want, whereas if you want a pergola or something like that, then maybe the circle makes sense. So I think that would be a good way to approach it, to determine what we see this as. Do we see it as an active space? Personally, in my mind, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking more of a passive recreation space, and perhaps have the design flow from there.
On that topic of it being an active or passive space, I'm wondering how many people, I'm not well versed on, how many people can you fit in a park, but I'm wondering from these plans, how many people we're imagining would be able to gather for an event there.
It's a really good question.
Yeah, I don't know the math of in a circle with a 50-foot diameter, but just touching base on like the parking piece of it, I don't think of this as something that would be used super frequently. It would just be another available space.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree. And we don't want a sign up that says no skateboarding.
Well, the interesting thing that happens is if in fact the space isn't used, that's exactly what will happen to it.
What happens?
The other thing, I stood over there today, a beautiful day, by the way. And one of the things that did cross my mind is there's a lot of traffic noise over there. You're surrounded really by traffic on, three sides.
Yeah, that's why they didn't want to put the play yard there. They were afraid children would dart out in the road.
Well, I think all of that, Freddie can tell us more about it than that, but Freddie could supply all sorts of strategies to, I think, shield traffic noise from the park itself and potentially keep people from darting in and out of the park if they didn't want them to. I'm not being facetious there. I think one of the components that we're going to have to look at to eliminate traffic noise for any purpose, whether we expect people to sit there and contemplate or whether you expect people to sit there and listen to a bass drum or something, either way, you're going to have a mechanism to shield traffic noise, and there is plenty of it there. So.
Yes, it's gotten noisier since the improvements. So, yes, that's another thought. Who would want to sit there if they're listening to a tractor trailer going by every 2 minutes?
Yes.
Not me.
No, I agree. I think the whole idea would be that, in fact, it's a place that people will regularly gather for one reason or another and enjoy being there. all right, that's a pretty general statement. But if in fact we don't, to repeat myself, if in fact it's just one of those places that it looks like it's paved, but nobody uses it, I guarantee it will be used for a purpose that we did not intend.
This makes me think now that I have to look at what people have done about noise mitigation in public spaces that have traffic near them.
Not a bad idea.
That's something that I'm interested in, and I can't really tell from the plans. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong version that doesn't have the granular detail, but the potential for tree plantings. Obviously the parcel was clear cut as part of this road construction, but what potential there is to kind of plant more trees on the property. And I think that goes back to Andrew's point about shade, and I think it also could serve as a potential,
right,
also visual.
One of the things that Andrew invited me to do today was to walk over and look at that park, and I recommend everybody go over there at 11, 12 o'clock and stand there in the upper corner near where one of those catchment basins are located, very near the street the new element of the street that's being cut through there. Just stand there and look across that park, see how big it is. Imagine what you might be wanting to use, that park for, and at the same time, listen to the traffic on 85 and St. Mark Street, and just kind of take it all in for a few minutes. I found it instructive to do that.
Good point. That is a really, really, really good point.
So can I just quickly show here? This is from the conceptual plans that VHB did with the circular space in February, right? So here's the trace of the history walk that it's not really part of these plans anymore, that we talked about maybe bringing back. And so, I mean, these are just mock-ups kind of, but in terms of some of the concepts which drove it, it's things like this, which are, now if I move, I don't know if you guys can do this, you can move the windows where are you seeing that's boxes
Yeah,
going
it
there?
looks like that's,
So that's a harder scape,
building.
and that's a less, that's a more, but the idea is that in
this one on the right, the one at 3 o'clock there, as you look at it with the woman in the yellow shirt, that looks so urban to me.
Yeah, these are just, where did I go there?
3 o'clock. Oh, it's kind of off.
She's got there's a woman standing there with black pants and a yellow.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so it's just showing concepts.
Yeah, I'm afraid you guys, I've blocked here. I can't. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I can see the edge of the picture. Yeah, I agree. And by the way, none of these low-level plantings that they've described here are going to do much to mitigate truck noise, that sort of thing.
Nothing,
so,
right, or the trees. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and a 50-foot oak won't do much to mitigate it a lot either. But there are other things that can be done, I would assume. I mean, here, see that catchment basin? Well, I'm pointing at it. Isn't that stupid? The catchment basin in the upper component.
I've been doing that all night, by the way.
Yeah, right. Just stand up there, near there. I mean, I really urge everybody to do it. And just look down towards the library. And you can see that it's not a small space. It really isn't. There's room to do a lot of different things, multiple different things, as I kind of imagined it in any case. But things going down St. Mark Street, things coming up 85, accelerating away from the light, it's noisy. If it's noisy, nobody's going to want to be there. So we got to figure out something. Yeah, I agree with that. And how we, in fact, I mean, if in fact, when we're going to have, let's say, a meeting space where, let's say, the kids would gather and have lessons, etc., and whether it's a pergola or some other kind of meeting space, and you might want to have that away from the roads, On the other hand, if in fact it was a performance space where the kids gathered to do plays or something else, you'd want the crowd to be further away from the noise so that in fact they wouldn't be as bothered as potentially the performers might be.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Now, this
that's
is
all.
making me want to go over there and stand there tomorrow and see.
I
some of
really
the
urge you. I mean, not everybody has the time to do it, obviously, but if in fact you do, I really urge you to go over and take a look at it. You're far enough. If in fact there are burials next to the burial yard, our current burial ground outside of that wall, within 15, 20, 30 feet, I don't know what it turns out to be. But you can see if you look at that in fact you're not just, well, aside from what's already been done, you're not really disturbing that area at all. And it may be a very interesting area to provide information about the Nipmuc Village itself. And the rest of it down towards the library parking lot can be purposed for other things.
What were you going to say, James?
I'm wondering, just to touch on that great point, Bill, that if there were unmarked burials within a certain distance from the marked cemetery, that instead of, without needing to change any plans, we could instead be deletative, so to say, in that we just don't pave or develop over a certain area, and we could, explore preserving that part of it.
Absolutely, pollinator gardens, if something of that nature. We've used Miss Gillespie's name in vain here, I guess, on occasion.
She has her hand raised too, if you want me to.
But I mean, those are things that absolutely could be done up in that particular corner. It's a great location for it. And who wants necessarily to sit on the wall with a tombstone right in back of you while you listen to God knows what? So yeah, I agree.
Do we have a raised hand, Andrew?
Yes, Freddie has her hand raised.
Freddie, speak to us.
Hi, I did just want to mention when you're talking about mitigating the noise there. I know like they put barrier walls in along the Mass Pike, which is pretty extreme, but landscaping can do a lot. Trees and, evergreens in particular, and other in the leafed out months, deciduous trees and shrubs. So the plan that is currently proposed, you may not be aware, has 15 trees planned and over 100 3 to 4 foot shrubs. Now that composition, and we are making comments on some of the ones that are actually proposed because they're not native or they're cultivars, and that's a whole story we're working with Karen on. But there are many other native plants that can be used as well that could help with noise, and where you place them is certainly a great way of cutting back the noise. But I would urge everyone to take a look at the Triangle Garden down by the T station.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Not garden, the park. And that isn't utilized much. And one of the things is because I believe there's too many trees. People like an open area that they can see into that is inviting. And so you can overdo it, underdo it. There's a lot to be considered, but I'm just saying that isn't also in a very noisy, busy area, and people just don't tend to walk into it because they don't really know what's in there. I think that's
people do avoid noise, though, Freddie. That's the thing. People avoid noise. They don't instinctively go toward a noisy place. That's the thing I'm concerned about here.
So, and yeah, I'm just saying that if you're thinking about remedies for noise, plantings can do a lot to help with that. You'll see also on the Mass Pike, some places where they don't put the sound barriers, they put trees up, evergreens, or trees to help block the noise. So, and again, we want to weigh in.
That's great, and this is again opening up the discussion of the. I mean, we seem to be taking a view of. I mean, the idea that it would be too noisy to use never occurred to me until 20 minutes ago. but it's huge, right?
Just to chime in on that, I guess when I was there earlier, and then I ran into Bill and we went there. I mean, I didn't find it particularly that noisy. I know that I'm maybe I really didn't. I mean, we were there at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There really isn't that much traffic. There can be traffic around rush hour, and I didn't find it. I thought it was a beautiful day, very relaxing. But so I think the idea of walls by the I don't like that idea.
Can I say I was being a little bit over the top, like that?
I know.
That's not what you want to do, but you can use plantings. And
okay.
When I also say that, when we talk about these pollinator gardens, the name gardens is misleading to some people because it's habitat, you know, using all of the native trees and shrubs, you know, provide that benefit. It's not, so you understand when we're talking about the native plantings and pollinator habitat there, it's not just a flower garden. It's all, you know, all of the plantings combined together.
We want butterflies, Freddie. We want a lot of butterflies in this place.
And well, you want birds too, right?
And birds.
That's a talk we'll be giving at another time. I'll invite you all.
All right.
Listen, I hate to be a wet blanket here, but we've been talking for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I don't know about
you. Are you
you
suggesting a motion to adjourn, or would you?
I'm wondering before we.
James wants to say something. What is it?
Before we adjourn, I'm wondering if we could just get like very speedy run through of a few things, just so we know where we are on everything. So, like, for example, I know we discussed an archaeological survey that was recommended by the State Historical Commission. We say that we want to sort of come back to that after consulting and hearing from the Nipmuc Nation and Chief Hawley. Should we come back to that idea?
Yes, and also after we hear back from St. Mark's.
And back from St. Mark's?
Yeah, I think so, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, my preliminary view of that is no one has any idea how much it would cost. No one has any idea how long it would take. No one has any idea what it would show. And one thing I thought a lot about was Dan had mentioned Ashland, where they did a dig.
Yeah, the Fisk, yeah.
That is at one of the villages that Russ Horan talked about. So this is not a village site, even from the page 40 of the Nick Noble book, which is really just a handwritten map. That shows the village, Nipmuc Village, being on the other side of the street by the rock outcropping, which is really by St. Mark's.
Yes.
Not over here. So already it sounds like some people are interested in maybe looking at different parts of the design of this, but because you might be looking at a much different price tag for it, because this was bid together with other things and resulted in a lower price. The first time this went out for bid, it was too high and the select board rejected the bid. So,
well, in the same way that the monument we'd be exploring would be funded independently, so too could an archaeological survey.
Except
but James, hasn't that been significantly disturbed as property, as land?
Yeah.
What are we going to find? They've taken four feet off of sections of that particular property with a bulldozer.
I think what we'd need to do is have somebody who's done it before come in and say, oops, sorry, no point, or oops, yeah, we'll look here. Okay. I think we don't have enough information at this point.
Right.
I think there's kind of a larger, I don't know if I want to say split or, you know, it seems like we're kind of moving in two different directions here. On the one hand, we are, in my personal opinion, and I don't know if this is the opinion of the working group, but you know, dwelling on the past a bit to find out what exactly happened and what, you know, if we can remedy some of the perceived problems with the site. And on the other hand, we're moving forward with pretty much design and implementation. And those two paths are somewhat incompatible, I think. So I'm not sure exactly, which way we're going to move in. But it seems like we're at, and this was true of our first meeting as well, that we're at somewhat of a crossroads in terms of which direction we'd like to take this in. Obviously, if we're talking about park design, then we plan to have a park there, and who cares about an archaeological dig, right? That's kind of the associated logic with that, I would have to imagine. So, I think we have a decision to make essentially.
But conceivably,
Grant, I don't agree with you on that.
Okay, sure.
The reason I don't agree, I think it's very possible to have an understanding of what has occurred there historically, and if there is anything historically that we think should be preserved.
Okay.
Number one. Then we say, in addition to that, given the charge that I think we've received from the Board of Selectmen, what do we think this place should look like? So one is constraining and the other is a vision within that constraint, if that makes sense.
in other words, after we say that there is a dig and it is done, and it says, yes, there are burials here, then what do? We're still going to move forward with some kind of design for the land.
Sure.
I agree. I would hope that this isn't an irreconcilable choice, that we can sort of go on a two-track system if we need to consider these two different things.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. So
Well, do you think so, Grant? I mean, say they do a dig, say it takes 3 years, they find all these things, then we still have the situation of something to put there or do there.
Well, but by that time, in 3
It'll all be
years,
gettable
we've done
then,
our job.
right? I mean,
So that's what I mean. So I keep on hearing that we have a limited charge, which technically we do. We have a tight
Andrew is
timeline.
nodding vigorously, right?
Yeah, I see that. We have a tight timeline here, fairly tight, I'd say. And so it seems to me that, if we pursue a dig, irrespective of whether or not I think that's the right thing, then that is somewhat incompatible with our perceived timeline.
But
regardless of my personal opinion of whether we should do it, that's why I was kind of bringing it up, because if we decide to, I don't know if anyone has contacted St. Mark's or not, but talk to St. Mark's about the potential for this, then anyway, that's kind of where.
Well, that's all good. Bill, what were you going to say? You started to.
Oh no, I mean my point is that even if in fact the let's say an archaeological dig was conducted and was fruitful, that they found something, in other words, we still, as a committee, irrespective of the budget, Andrew, have an obligation to provide a vision for what we think this thing should look like, or how it should integrate into the town center, and what it should be, in essence, constructed, how it should be constructed. Those things aren't incompatible. That thing could sit there fallow if necessary while archaeologists went through it for 2 or 3 years, as long as the vision that we came up with as a committee and it was presented to the Board of Selectmen, as long as that vision sat there at some point in time, either it could be implemented, modified, or not done at all, I suppose. But at least we have, as a committee, done our job in terms of trying to come up with a citizen's view of what we think this place might look like and what we would like to use it for. Am I making any sense then?
Could I add on to that just a tiny bit? Because we are representatives of the town, I think we should be aware of what most of the people in the town would like and want, and stay responsive to that. And if the general feeling in the town is forget it, why bother, then that we have to hear that. And if the general feeling is we would like to be sensitive to the First Peoples, then we have to hear that too. So I guess it's not only just to get the job done, but it's to sort of be responding to what we think most of the residents in town want. Not even the boards at this point, Board of Selectmen, but I think just also the residents, since the residents are the people who are.
Well, you've raised an interesting issue, because then that requires us to begin to do some sort of canvassing or survey to try to discern what people really want. And my experience has been,
Okay.
but my experience has been, unless you give people a kind of a specific view, if you ask a sample of 1,000 people in Southborough what they would like this to be, you're going to get about 1,000 different answers. So you've got to say, here are 10 or 5 or 4 different things to look at.
Yeah, but I guess, I don't know. I guess it's just the thing with representative government. This isn't our project. It's the town's project.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. And it's the town. It's our job, I would think, to present to the Board of Selectmen a vision. We don't have a financial interest in this. That's their job. Their job is to get the job done. But here's our vision, or here's a vision that we think will work. Now, the Board of Selectmen is going to have to say, oh, I know how to pay for it, or I don't. Number one. And number two is we've got to somehow conduct a campaign to make sure that people in the town agree with it. At least I assume that's the way the Board of Selectmen wants this process to work.
Yes, and I agree. And it is 9:30, and I have to pull the plug on this now, because
I agree.
We're gonna go until 1 a.m. because
it's been fun though.
It's a fabulous discussion. I hope we're doing it right. And thank you everyone for your input. I will do, and if anyone on the working group has ideas about reaching out to the Nipmuc band who is appropriate here, I will very much appreciate hearing from you. And shall we say that we'll set our next meeting for 7 o'clock on St. Patrick's Day, barring disasters? And do I have a motion to adjourn? Does anyone mind if we adjourn?
Well, all right, I propose we adjourn. We need a second, and then we need a vote.
Yes, okay, so we have a motion to adjourn at 9:30 by Bill Sines. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, that's from Grant. Okay.
I was worried.
No, we're all ready to go to bed, all of us, I think. Okay, Andrew?
Aye.
Okay, Marguerite Landry, aye. Grant?
Aye.
Okay, Bill?
Aye.
Okay, and for you, James?
Abstain.
Okay, so the meeting is adjourned at 9:31. And thank you for doing the minutes, James. That's above and beyond. Good night, everybody.
Good discussion, folks. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Bill. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.